Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Shannon de Rehove. Welcome to our webinar on the oceans economy and sustainability, hosted on behalf of Sustainability and ESG Africa Conference and Expo. This webinar will explore Africa's ocean economy, which is a vital pillar of the continent's development, underpinning food security, trade, energy, and livelihoods across more than 38 coastal and island states. Grounded in African policy priorities and development realities, the discussion will focus on practical pathways to protect ocean ecosystems, secure livelihoods, unlock investment, and position Africa as a leader in a climate-resilient and inclusive blue economy. Before we get started, please take note of the following. The chat and the Q&A are available to you. Please post your questions in the Q&A and your comments in the chat. Both the Q&A and the chat are at the bottom of your screen. Please be aware that we are recording this webinar and will send the recording to you when it's available. We are also streaming the webinar live on YouTube and will share the link in the chat once it's available. So with that, I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Wendy Poulton. She's the Director of Strategy and Risk Consultancy Strategic Mindsets, as well as the co-founder of the Sustainability and ESG Africa Conference and Expo. Wendy will facilitate the discussion with today's panel, which consists of Immaculée Uwimana, Senior Policy Advisor at the African Union, and Odwa Mtati, CEO of the South African International Maritime Institute. I'll hand over now to moderator Wendy Poulton to start the discussion. Over to you, Wendy.
Thank you so much, Shannon, and it's a pleasure to be here today, and welcome to the panelists. I think when we started talking about having an oceans economy webinar, it was just so broad, the topic. So we're lucky that we have two speakers today that can help us really think through some of those very diverse and complex issues that are covered under oceans economy from a sustainability perspective. And that's everything from food security, trade, energy, livelihoods. And Africa has 38 coastal and island states. So it's a very big issue for Africa and how we connect into the global value chain. But it's also an issue around the kinds of maritime transport that is now traversing our seas along the African coast with green hydrogen derived fuels such as ammonia and methanol, and what that also means for Africa using its renewable resources and what it means for us and our ports and infrastructure about how we could potentially exploit those resources for the benefit of African citizens. And I think what we really want to focus on today is look at some of the practical pathways about how we protect ocean ecosystems, how we can make sure that we're securing livelihoods, how we unlock investment amongst all the noise for investment that's out there, and how having an inclusive blue economy is going to position Africa as a leader, especially with the additional stress that we have at the moment with climate change. So I'm going to start off by asking each of the panelists to just tell us a little bit about themselves and their organizations and what kind of work they are focusing on in the very broad, as we said, oceans economy topic. So Odwa, I'm going to start with you.
No, thanks very much, and thank you for the invitation to the seminar. It is much appreciated. The South African International Maritime Institute is a product of the Operation Phakisa Oceans Economy project of the South African government, in which they identified the need for an entity to coordinate essentially three activities. One, it is maritime advocacy, in which you engage with people so that they can understand the benefit of the use of the ocean in a sustainable manner. Secondly, we also engaged in maritime research and innovation. And then the third element is capacity building and skills development, because you would not be able to pursue any of these activities unless you have got an empowered workforce as well as a knowledgeable communities as well. So that's the institute in summary. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Immaculée.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm coming from Africa Union Commission under the Division of Economy. So specifically, I'm going to focus on Blue Economy Division, which is the division that is promoting the inclusive blue economy. Our work covers the whole continent. That means member state. We work with regional economic communities to mainstream blue economy in different member states. So our work is at the same policy level. We support countries to mainstream, to put the blue economy in their policies in different sectors, and also we support them to do to implement the demonstration projects where lessons learned and good practices can be scaled up across the country. So we work with day to day with the countries, but also with those different partners, including UN agencies and also other bilateral partners, private sector, etc., etc. So that's in a nutshell, because Africa Union Commission covers a lot, but when it comes of blue economy, that's our work to help at the policy level, at the continental, but also promoting community practices with regard to blue economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to stay with you and then I'll come back to you, Odwa. But Immaculée, one of the issues obviously about having a sustainable blue economy is trying to manage the extraction side of the sector, where we are extracting fish and other marine resources, and having to deal with some of the illegal and unreported fishing that goes on within that sector, not only by Africans, but by other countries as well. And how do we balance that with regeneration? And in a way that's we're managing the ocean within ecological limits, but we're still maintaining economic viability. Can you perhaps just take us through some of the issues in that area that the African Union is dealing with, and how you collectively do it as a continent?
Thank you very much, Wendy. When we are talking about a regenerative ocean economy, that means to restore ecosystem while also we are generating income. So in practice, this means implementing initiatives, as I was saying, which are going to reduce the pressure on oceans shocks. You see, for instance, feedstocks are transboundary. So we need a holistic approach, a coordination approach, which help to reduce pressure, but also which brings job creation for community to increase their livelihood. So, for instance, when we talk about the regenerative initiatives, we are talking about scaling mangrove, blue carbon restoration, implementing marine spatial planning, and also expanding sustainable aquaculture practices, etc., etc. So if you see like the Africa Investment Tide report, it shows that the climate change and water-related shocks already cost Africa billion annually. So managing extractive sectors within ecological limits is therefore economic risk management, not a constraint on growth. So this is something we have to take serious.
Thank you so much. Odwa, would you like to add to that? You mentioned Operation Pakisa earlier. How does that fit into that?
Yeah, I think the continent, the countries within the continent obviously require well-defined adaptation strategies that speaks to sustainable resource management. That we think, is key because it addresses some of the primary challenges that Imokele has referred to, which include climate resilience, change in the food system, as well as the need. Because, quite large parts of the continent are sea-facing. So whatever strategies that you develop, you must recognize the rights of those communities that exist there. Having said that, the practical things that you would need to consider include the need to rebuild and maintain fish stocks. And it could be that the referred to marine spatial planning frameworks, could have elements of rights-based systems instead of open access. Because, from a policy point of view, you always understand the bigger picture. But, you need to work alongside communities, in that. So there are two elements that we have spoken to: rebuild and maintain fish stocks, the need to develop marine spatial planning frameworks to maintain the balance. One of the things that I think Africa generally does not focus on is data gathering, to ensure that at the center of the work, that we undertake as a continent, data is central to it, because it would ensure that we are able to strengthen the monitoring systems, the need to control and surveil illegal and unreported fishing, understand the scale, and then develop the required technologies in order for us to be able to tackle that. Now, with Operation Pakisa, Wendy, you'll remember that the subsector identified to complement fisheries was sustainable aquaculture, because it was saying, it's a nascent subsector that needs, to be supported in order for it to, come up to the level of fisheries, for people to recognize its value. And alongside it, with the recent process that spoke to small-scale fishing, awarding them fishing rights, we think that, those are some of the strategies, to deal with the challenges that you have mentioned.
Thank you so much for raising that. I mean, I was in Mauritius recently and saw their aquaculture in the sea that they have there, and they were telling me that 99% of the produce from that aquaculture goes to Europe. So a really good sort of economic activity that they've got going there. So if we could now move on a little bit to, I mean, we're talking about these initiatives about how we make it restorative and how we look after our economy. You mentioned a little bit about illegal activities. How do we as Africa deal with those illegal fishing in our waters? Is it a coordinated approach? How is that managed? Immaculée, do you want to start with that one?
Yes, thank you. No, the African Union approach is anchored in the ecosystem-based management and also regional cooperation. As I said, fish stocks are transboundary. we see ocean water are shared among different countries. So enforcement must be coordinated across all members and the regional economic community. Also, the maritime security program is trying to be enforced to combat the illegal and the unreported as well as unregulated fishing, and to strengthen monitoring system. So also, African Union is supporting institutional capacity building and policy harmonization, because this is very crucial that countries have a harmonized approach for managing their resources, reducing this pressure, establishing this legal and the regulatory instrument to manage fish stock and the other seafoods that are shared. Also, there is this continental trade integration, private sector engagement, which is very, very important. If people are working together, the country are working together, because these are enablers for Africa to shift from this exporting, for instance, the way they are exporting raw fish, just to build regional seafood value chains to ensure long-term food security. This is how some of practical and regulatory framework, how African Union is working with the countries to support this to combat and this illegal, but also to promote the sustainable extraction within the ocean limits as they are shared among countries. Thank you.
Odwa, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, our contention is that part of what you need are harmonized standards, in the respective regions that Immaculée spoke to. Because what it is that is a crime in one country, in the next country, it may not be. So people just move those boundaries because they recognize the weaknesses in the system. So when you harmonize, your systems, you would be able to ensure that in that particular region, whatever that is a threat affects all of those countries in that region. So at Saimi, part of the work that we had done was to look at STACY provisions that would ensure that in the SADC region, at least, all of the capacity building initiatives could be similar. The training of judicial officers, is similar. And, just get countries to be able to have similar laws that govern, fishing and related. Now, there's a cost factor in some of the technologies that are going to be used. It's an expensive exercise. And therefore, instead of each country going on their own, you could have shared satellite monitoring systems, to look at the issue of the cost and, always promoting a core governance, of our oceans. Perhaps the last point is the issue of the maritime domain awareness, which we can then focus on joint patrol operations so that, we can get the navies, to work together in this regard. So those are perhaps some of the key considerations for us at the moment.
Can I just ask a follow-up question there? What is the role of the International Maritime Organization in this policing and looking at illegal fishing? Do they play a role in there or not?
They work through maritime domain awareness, in which each country and region is given the responsibility to monitor the zones in and around, specific area. So parts of it is South Africa knowing that this is the zone that it is responsible for, as well as any other country, so that they can help to monitor and conduct the patrols that are required, because they know exactly what is the portion that they are meant to police and patrol.
Thank you. Because it's a huge issue. I mean, I saw a figure when I was doing research for this webinar that Africa loses $24 billion a year from illegal fishing. That should be coming through our economies. I mean, it's a really big number just from a job perspective and economic prosperity as well.
Yes.
So thank you for that. I'd like to move on now to start talking a little bit about the overlap between the oceans economy and energy, because there are obviously some very big issues. The one being exploration and extraction of energy from seabeds such as oil and gas, but also, as I mentioned earlier, the use of onshore renewable energy sources to produce green hydrogen, which is fundamentally going to change some of the energy value chains that occur in the world at the moment. And we've been seeing the problems. We were chatting while we were waiting to come online, the problems in the Middle East at the moment with shipping lanes being able to or not navigate the Straits of Hormuz. And so, I mean, with green hydrogen, it could be different producers from other parts of the world that are then shipping, which means a complete shift around infrastructure as well. So how, Makili, let me start with you. What do you think about this energy oceans economy overlap, and are we paying enough attention to it? And what are some of the initiatives that are being undertaken to address that?
Yeah, thank you. Before I talk about it, we should understand that the maritime transport is currently accounting for around 3% of global greenhouse gas emission. This is a serious issue, as we are even, promoting this food security from seafood. That means if we don't balance the way we are using energy when shipping, for fishing, or even for transport of other commodities across continents, that will be a very, very serious issue. So Africa has several comparative advantages that could reshape this position. I mean, this transition from this renewable, from this fuel to, or fossil fuel to renewable fuel, such as hydrogen, ammonia, and other clean energies you suggested. Mainly, you see, Africa can transition from being just a transition route for commodities, to producer, or even to a hub for refueling for global shipping. So we know that Africa is rich with abundant renewable energy, port located on major trade routes between Asia and America. So Africa has opportunity to supply green fuel, modernize ports, and create new industry cluster skills jobs. This is possible. So, however, as you ask, we need to bring sustainable practices, because there are a lot of risks. Large scale fuel production. If we go for large fuel production, this will require significant energy, land, and water to be possible. Also, when we want to expand the port, this will definitely damage the coastal ecosystem and the fisheries if poorly managed. So the key priorities now for African continent is to support the local industries, strong and put in place strong environmental safeguards, and also try when benefiting for coastal communities, we need just not to bring decarbonization for the sake of bringing decarbonization. We should balance all those things, because if we are going, for instance, to displace local community for the sake of producing methanol or any other energy sources, that will bring imbalance instead of solving the problem we have now. But otherwise, it's the time for Africa continent to move from this fossil fuel to the clean energy, renewable energy, but in a way which is sustainable, as we see the trend is very, very serious. Thank you.
Thank you. Odwa, your thoughts on this?
I think the country's ambitions around decarbonization are contained in the nationally determined commitments, the NDC, which is a reflection of the country's commitment and ambition to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, we almost have an expectation that each country, ought to be moving towards that, because the ocean has got competing needs in its nature. Provision of energy, food security, and those sometimes do not, just sit comfortably alongside one another. They, do bring about the conflict. So those regulatory instruments that are contained in the NDCs tend to place exactly the clarity on, what it is that needs to happen and at what point. I thought Immaculate would reflect on the call to action at the Nairobi conference in 2023, in which all African, countries committed to their willingness to limit greenhouse emissions through an adoption of renewable, energy emissions. Now, you had earlier, Wendy, asked about the role of the IMO. Now, the IMO a few years ago introduced a MAPOL as an instrument that works on the prevention of pollution of the marine environment by ships. And a number of countries, I think in the continent, it was reported as 17 that had signed the MAPOL agreement, in which they committed themselves on the monitoring, of the pollution caused by ships. Now, South Africa is one of those countries that have signed the MAPOL Convention, and currently, with the Department of Transport and SAMSA, are in the process of finalizing the National Action Plan in respect of the IMO Greenhouse Emission Strategy 2023. So I think, the question is, you do need a defined strategy in order for you to have plans that commit you, to specific actions, recognizing, that it's not an easy a process as well, because it is in many instances, quite a challenge, because at the moment the continent is looking at technology as part of the resolution of that. Now we tend to look to Europe, for the production of those technologies, which then induces the matter of costs, which places a particular demand on the continent to be able to look to itself to produce these capabilities, so that it doesn't have to look elsewhere all the time, but look to itself to be able to deal with these. And parts of that is unified policies that would ensure that we act in a unified manner in order for us not to leave some countries behind. Because we have seen that, within the continent, sometimes we act in a fractured manner. We tend to act in what we think is best for the country, tending to forget the fact that with the number of member states of the African Union, we could be achieving more if we are that unified a force.
Thank you so much. And I just want to go through some of the questions that have been posted on the Q&A. So linked to that, it was a question about corruption and people bribing officials, turning off transponders on ships, that kind of thing. Do you think that there's a role for the collective African Union in dealing with that, or is that also something that has to happen at a coordinated country level? Emakili, you want to answer that?
Yes. Of course, African Union has its great role of convening all member states to discuss those critical issues across the continent. This is always through cooperation and also leveraging to its regional economic communities, because sometimes those regional economic communities help when it is a given region where they are relocated, located, where they can support concerned countries to solve those issues. But otherwise, African Union has different matters, programs, and division. There's a division of security, there's political affairs, there's peace, and there's this blue economy, agriculture, etc. All those, depending on the issues that is being raised, which is a common, we can revert to regional economic community if it is one region concerned, or if it is a continental level issue. This is treated, discussed in the executive, where represented ministers are gathered to discuss and find solution for a continental issue, and also they can submit to the head summit of head of states if it is something to be escalated. Of course, corruption is a matter of governance. So later on, maybe as we discuss, we see that governance is very, very key in the sustainable management of ocean resources. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to combine two of the other questions that have come up in the Q&A because they're similar. So the one is about a lot of the exploration happening in Africa being from, this is one question talks about European, from Bolewa countries, but you also, I imagine, get other, I know in other countries in Africa you have non-European, but other countries coming in to exploit fossil fuels, while at home, they are transitioning to a much lower carbon base and also setting carbon border adjustments. And then there's a question from Olinkanya who says, or Linka, sorry, who asking about independent players from outside of the continent playing this sort of coordination role. So, Adwa, do you want to just take a stab at that? I mean, how do we deal with outside people coming in and bringing investment and bringing money and jobs in some cases to the continent, but us also taking the initiative and making sure that the continent also benefits and we don't have this extractive economy that we've had in the past?
I think that's the primary challenge, is that, most countries in the continent have not moved away from the extractive nature of the economies. They depend on the export of natural resources. And therefore, that by itself then invites the other non-African countries to be key players in the work that the continent can undertake by itself. So what is required is a strategic shift to support manufacturing within the continent, because that by itself would mean that not only do we manufacture, but we are able to grow our economies and support the consumption, of some of these processes. So we need to raise it to that particular level, because what other people are recognizing is the fact that we have much of what the rest of the world needs, whether it is the sun, whether it is the wind, whether it is the oceans. And therefore, we would not take an opportunity when it is presented for free. So it is therefore important that, we don't just talk about it, as Immaculate said, that we get to the point of defining, and using the instruments that are available. So the production of many policies without us acting on them, is an exercise in futility. So it is important that we get to the point, of actioning. The earlier question that you asked, for an example, is one of those things that most people do not understand the price that is paid for corruption. They think that is just but one of those things. It is not but one of those things. It's an expensive thing, because somebody else is paying the price for the fact that there is no movement on a particular activity. That's why we support the investment in technology, for us to be able, to move, not just from consumption, but the productive nature of the African economies. That's our that we don't have to import everything in order for us to undertake activities. We have, they say that, South Africa, the last of what it produced was the, what's that thing that cleans swimming pools, as an invention. Yes. Now we're saying, we saw now an autonomous vessel, and we are saying that's where we ought to be, so that all of the countries within the continent can work within the Africa Free Trade Zone, and pursue, more common goals.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point around the Africa Free Trade Agreement and how we would capitalize on that for the continent in general. I was at a conference a couple of years ago where somebody said Africa should just build a wall around us. And we should just say, okay, we've got all the resources. You come and get it, and we're going to negotiate the best deal for us for you to have it. I was like, I don't think that's a bad philosophy.
No, it's not.
Okay, so we've got two questions, quite specific. The one is, are there programs on marine carbon dioxide reduction and curbing marine pollution in Africa? So perhaps Immaculate could answer that one. And then there's also one about exploration programs on thanium fertilizer extraction from the seabed. Either panelist want to tackle those?
I think let me try and deal with the latter. You know, part of what the challenge is the fact that we have made many issues to be an either or. We do not want to recognize the fact that even the UN Sustainable Goals speak about us using those different goals in the promotion of the well-being of society in its totality. So newer activities like, exploration, we make those to be perennial enemies. We do not have the science sometimes, to even explore such. And we use, either Australian, New Zealand, research that has been undertaken to either support or not, support. And part of what we're promoting is the fact that the continent ought to increase its research and development capabilities in order for it to begin to resolve its own challenges in this regard, and not having to say, no, we have seen this thing work in Norway. We can learn best practices from other countries and other continents. That's not the issue. But we must get to the point, wherein we use our own developed capabilities. And this, amongst others, requires that there is more investment in research, development, and innovation in order to make that strategic shift. A perfect example, we did some desktop research on cyber security, within the continent. And you find that there's limited research that is being undertaken on such a crucial element at the moment. You know how many institutions have been hacked, but we seem to be unable, to rise up to the occasion. Immaculate, I'll leave the most difficult questions to you. Thank you very much for being brave.
So I think the question is on curbing the decarbonization and the
carbon dioxide
pollution.
reduction.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, there are some initiatives in marine curbing the marine pollution. You see that circular economy program are being promoted across different countries, especially plastic waste, which are, if you see how different countries till now need that initiative to be able to reduce the waste that are being dumped in the oceans, but also on the level of carbon, the initiatives. We are supporting the initiative that's starting looking how ecosystem services such as sequestration, sustainable management of mangroves can also contribute to the reduction of carbon. Of course, these energy, green energy initiatives are at the initial stage, but they are under the program that are being developed and looking for the finance. But otherwise, the circular economy now is the topic, hot topic now for different countries and also the carbon sequestration using these mangrove forests, which can yield blue bond, and also other carbon market benefits. That's what I can say, but it's still, we should recognize this really still at the early stage. And we hope that with the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, African continent is going to develop significant programs to tackle those issues. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And just to go back to the last point, do either of you know anything about the deep sea mining, and in particular the question about lithothamnium exploration?
No, not within our radar at the moment. We'll actually follow it up after the webinar. What we know is the exploration on oil and gas reserves.
And Immaculée, anything from your side that you know about that? Deep sea mining and lithothamnium?
Unfortunately, no.
Not. Okay. Sorry about that, Marco. Thank you for raising that. It's quite an interesting issue that we could certainly look at. We have about 15 minutes left, so I wanted to just move on to infrastructure, discussions around infrastructure. As we've been talking about different fuels and different supply chains, Africa Free Trade Agreement, that all relates back to the kinds of port infrastructure and supporting infrastructure to deliver goods to the ports. What is it? I mean, I was in India a couple of years ago, and then one minister announced they were building 56 new ports as one country. What is Africa's port status like, and what do you think is the investment that we're going to need over the next couple of decades if we want to realize some of these opportunities from the ocean economy? Odwa, can I start with you?
I think it's not for us as a continent. I would move from the basis that it's not necessarily the number of new ports that we build, but it is maximization of what kind of infrastructure we have. Of course, there are countries that would need to build ports to facilitate, the development, because we know that there are parts within the continent that have remained underdeveloped. Our contention is that we must use the marine spatial planning framework in a productive way, because we tend to make, subsectors to compete when we could actually be promoting the coexistence, of activities as opposed to the approach that, most people tend to make. You tend to want to make tourism to compete with aquaculture development. Yet it's an activity that if you really, plan it well, have the proper, policy instruments, they can actually coexist, because you would do so considerate, to the ecological factors, the social factors, as well as the economic factors. So we need to consider that. Now, we know that the World Bank always issues the port reports, annually. Of course, they are contested because of the measures that are utilized, vessels outside of ports, how long they stay. So our contention is that you could have other, instruments in which you measure, the effectiveness of the use of ports within the continent and in respective countries. So we contend that as we build the infrastructure, we must make it, possible for it to be futuristic looking as opposed to backward looking, so that it is able to facilitate that inclusive manner of achieving, economic development.
Mm. Oh, that's such an important point. Thank you. I mean, and it's like the smart ports, right? For multiple use infrastructure as well, which is less financing. And what can governments do to support that kind of thinking from a policy perspective, Immaculée?
Yeah, thank you very much. At the level of African Union, we promote an integrated coastal zone management to prevent between economic sectors and ecosystem. Whatever government should have, they should be in mind that there should be a balance between all sectors, economic sectors. In a way, they are using those kind of infrastructure, ports and whatever. So, for instance, the development of marine spatial planning is a key government instrument at the level of countries. Countries should not just say, okay, we want to invest because maybe there are some potential investors coming in just to invest for investing. There should be a thorough assessment of all activities across different sectors, and also consider the side of environment to, prevent high risks on the ocean, but also on the local communities. So for us, the promotion of investment, it's good. It's yes, recommended for countries, but they should have feasibility studies that lead to this spatial planning that shows here we can do this, here we can put such infrastructure, here there is a risk. If we invest in this at long term, there will be consequences on ecology, on local community, and so on.
Thank you. So you're talking really about an integrated infrastructure plan for the country that also then has regional linkages as well, if we really want to get a proper free trade agreement so that we understand it. So thank you for that. My last question is to you guys is going to be about skills. So we know that the MARPOL agreement is going to, if we're going to be shipping green hydrogen, you have to train port people in how to sign off compliance with the various requirements of MARPOL. And that auditors are going to have to be different. You're going to have different skill sets for doing research and innovation, maybe on lithothanium, thaminium. We also require different skills now for spatial planning that you were just mentioning, Immaculée, and other things like that. What are we doing about skills development in the sector and ensuring that those sustainability issues are integrated properly into that planning? And is it enough? So, Odwa, I'll start with you.
Okay, no, thanks very much. So I think key are partnerships and collaborations. There's a IOI in South Africa, there's SAIMI itself, and those institutions work at different levels, with IOI Southern Africa focusing on governance and policy development. We take a wider lens in as so far as that matter is concerned. So part of the message that we would want to convey is partnerships and collaborations within the continent as well as with international institutions, so that we can have the capability to look at the development of qualifications that would help us to achieve the desired goals, curriculum that is relevant. And I think IMO as well, for an example, with the advent of the use of alternative energies as opposed to fossil fuels, we are having to revise the curriculum, of specific qualifications to order for us to be able to adapt to the fact that alternative energies, are going to come on stream, the safety element of it. So the training of seafarers needs to be projected along the lines of those new energies. Earlier, we had spoken about the issue of, cybersecurity. So we would need to work to develop from the IMO conventions, some of those qualifications that would help us, as the continent and the country, to be able to prevent such. So there is a need to anticipate new developments, and in that anticipation, have the required skills. We know of instances, you buy goods from other countries, you don't even have a translator, those things don't work because, you do not work in a futuristic model that says this is what is going to be required. And in order for us to be able to grow the sector, these are the things that we need to consider. Decarbonization is but part of those things, and therefore we must have the required skill sets. And that is not an ad hoc intervention, but a planned intervention that we require.
Thank you. Mackley, any thoughts from you on skills?
Yes, currently, African Union Commission is working with partners to develop a training program. And we want to have short courses and online courses, and also some physical training on various items and areas. You consider, like you see, blue economy it's new science for different people, and also skills. The gap in the skills. So we are working with those partners to, first of all, assess the needs for trainings, and also later on there will be development of training program for youth. We are going to work with the university, marine academies in different countries, and then we are also promoting the knowledge exchange, in which we take some people from this area. We help them to make a tour in a given countries where they can see good practices and take them home to implement as well. So on these training skills, we understand, as we are talking about, for instance, blue carbon. So we are also targeting to build the capacity for different countries, for instance, to do blue accounts, because this is something which is not known by different people. You will see that the African countries, they just use consultants from different continents. But if we see the national capacity, it's not available. So we are trying to assess the capacity needs in all those areas so that there will be an integrated training program. And that program will start with, of course, pilot countries, but also will be scaled up. We are also trying to work with academic institutions to have those regular short courses where at any given time, some young people, youth, women can undertake those courses to have these skills we are talking about that are needed to promote fishing, to these new energy resources, the whole value chain. So that's how we are, of course, working with the countries, helping young people to tailor their skills to these new industries. Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody asked a question on the Q&A about how they could access any of that training. Do you have something that we could send out to people about how they can actually access any of that training?
From our Salime, Wendy, we are developing quite a number of shared learning programs to the point that actually is. So we have got Ocean Matters as an introduction into the ocean for those that are needing to have the capacity. And it focuses essentially on three elements: policy development, indigenous knowledge systems, and then the economic development element of it. So we'll share the link perhaps to yourselves to ensure that there's a wider access to it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Immaculate?
Yes, for now we are going to start with small island states. That's Seychelles, Mauritius, Comoros, Cabo Verde, Sao Tome, and also Guinea-Bissau. I don't know if his or she's coming from one of those countries, but also this training program that will be tailored into short course will be scaled up at the continental level. So once these will be ready, they will be posted on the AUC website. So I encourage the participant to follow up. They can be provided with our own address or contact so that they can, in the future, benefit from those training courses. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And there's just one final question that came in. What are the potential positive and negative impacts of green hydrogen to the automotive sector in the Eastern Cape? The automotive sector in the Eastern Cape is mostly light vehicles. The big application for green hydrogen is in really heavy vehicles where you could have a fuel cell that runs on hydrogen. So it's just not cost effective in the small scale transport sector at all. So I don't think it would have that much impact directly to the automotive sector. So thanks for that question. So I think that brings us to the end of our hour. It's been a really fascinating discussion. I do not know much about the oceans economy, so I've learned so much from our two panelists. Thank you so much. And back to you, Shannon.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Yes, agreed. I also didn't know much about it, so I've also learned a lot. So I thank you very much for that. I'd like to say thank you to everybody for joining us today. It really has been a pleasure sharing the topic of the oceans economy and sustainability with you. Before we wrap up, I'd like to extend my gratitude to our moderator, Wendy Poulton, and our guest speakers, Immaculée Uimana from the African Union and Odwa Mtati from the South African International Maritime Institute. If you have any further questions or would like to continue the conversation, feel free to reach out to us via email at shannon@creamermedia.co.za. And if you're interested in hearing more about the ESG Africa Conference, please visit the website at esgafricaconference.com. With that, I'd like to bid you all farewell. Thank you so much for your time and goodbye.